Imagine playing a championship basketball tournament, and for like 96% of the time you are on the hardwood. You are winning.
Which is just mathematically insane.
Right. I mean, you never trail. You never panic. You never have to execute some desperate late-game fouling strategy.
Yeah, you're just in total control.
Exactly. And that isn't some simulation run on a supercomputer. That is the actual mathematical reality of what Columbia University just pulled off in week 14 of 2026.
It really is a fascinating snapshot.
It is. And welcome in to you, the listener, to today's deep dive. Today, we aren't just reading the box scores, or skimming the highlight reel.
Right. There's way too much under the surface here.
Exactly. We're looking at a massive cultural shift happening in real time across women's athletics globally. The source material we're using today is this really comprehensive weekly highlight report tracking global and collegiate women's sports for this specific week.
Week 14.
Week 14, yes. And our mission for this deep dive is to unpack the underlying trends. We're looking at how the narrative is shifting from, crushing pressure to actual passion.
Yeah, which is a huge psychological pivot.
Huge. We'll look at how new powerhouses are challenging old dynasties and what this all means for the global sports ecosystem. So, okay, let's unpack this. We have to start with this transitional moment.
Well, what makes this specific week so fascinating is how it perfectly captures a transitional moment. And I mean that calmly and analytically. It's not just a transition between athletic seasons, but a fundamental shift in the psychological approach to competition itself.
Yeah, and to really understand that cognitive shift, we have to isolate it at the absolute peak of the mountain, right? The NCAA Women's March Madness Final Four.
The ultimate pressure test.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The landscape right now has distilled down to South Carolina, Texas, UCLA, and an undefeated UConn.
A truly elite group.
Absolutely. But let's isolate UConn and UCLA for a second, because they represent, two very different mechanisms of dominance.
Yeah.
I mean, UCLA has built this terrifying, just unburdened depth.
Yeah, they really have.
They are rotating multiple WNBA-level prospects through their lineup.
Yeah.
And there is literally no drop in their offensive efficiency.
Not at all. It's wave after wave.
Right. And then you have UConn walking into the Final Four at 38 and 38 wins, 0 losses. I mean, before we even get to the psychology of it, break down the sheer statistical anomaly of a 38-game win streak in the modern era of college basketball.
Well, statistically speaking, a 38-0 streak in the current landscape just shouldn't exist.
Right.
I mean, the standard deviation of shooting performances alone dictates that over a 38-game sample size, you will have at least 2, maybe 3 nights where your perimeter shooting completely collapses.
Just mathematically, your shots stop falling.
Exactly. And when you factor in the modern transfer portal, advanced defensive analytics, the sheer volume of high-level film study, everyone knows everything you do.
Right. Every opponent is walking onto the floor with a hyper-optimized scheme designed specifically to exploit your exact weaknesses.
Oh, wow.
So to survive 38 consecutive games, you aren't just beating the team in front of you. You are constantly mutating your own offensive and defensive schemes faster than the opposition's coaching staff can map them.
That sounds exhausting.
It is. You are surviving the hostile road environments, the travel fatigue that degrades your fast-twitch muscle response.
Yeah.
And, the absolute certainty that every single opponent is treating you as their national championship game.
So you are basically getting everyone's absolute theoretical peak performance every single night.
Every single night.
And when you look at stars like Ozzie Fudd and Sarah Strong on that UConn roster, they are doing this under the compounding gravity of the UConn legacy, which is massive.
The expectations are astronomical.
But the narrative emerging from their locker room, and really we're seeing this across the entire tournament, is this concept of joy.
Yes.
Joy.
Players and coaches are explicitly citing passion, emphasizing a purpose beyond just winning. It's like a playground mentality.
It's a massive shift.
But I have to push back slightly here, because traditional sports narratives always rely on the pressure cooker analogy.
Right, survival of the fittest.
Exactly. Fear of failure is supposed to be the ultimate motivator. So I guess my question is joy really a strategic advantage? Or is it just a nice PR narrative for a team that's already winning? Like when you're down by 4 with 90 seconds left, joy doesn't hit a three-pointer. Muscle memory hits the three-pointer.
What's fascinating here is that your skepticism is completely warranted if we define joy purely as just a fleeting emotion.
Okay.
But in the context of elite sports psychology, joy is actually a neurochemical state.
Yeah.
And it has a direct measurable impact on biomechanics.
Wait, really? it physically changes how you play.
Absolutely. Think about the old pressure cooker model you mentioned. When you motivate athletes purely through the fear of failure, you are maintaining a locker room in a constant state of amygdala activation.
The fight or flight center.
Exactly. And when the amygdala is dominant, the body floods with cortisol.
The stress hormone.
Right. And cortisol, physiologically, is highly detrimental to elite athletic performance over a prolonged period.
How so?
It increases muscle tension, and that degrades the fine motor coordination required for, say, a fluid jump shot. It literally narrows an athlete's peripheral vision.
Oh, wow, like tunnel vision.
Literally. A player operating in a fear state reacts a fraction of a second slower, their shot arc flattens out, and they miss the open player cutting on the weak side because their brain is treating a missed rotation like an actual physical threat to their survival.
So the pressure cooker is actually sabotaging them. They have the muscle memory, but the stress blocks it.
Precisely. Now contrast that with the joy or passion model. By systematically removing that paralyzing fear of failure, coaches shift the player's cognitive load from the amygdala to the prefrontal cortex.
Which does what?
It triggers the release of dopamine and anandamide. These are the neurochemicals associated with the flow state.
Ah, being in the zone.
Right. And dopamine acts as a massive performance enhancer here. It accelerates pattern recognition, drastically improves spatial awareness, and lets the body execute that grueling muscle memory without the interference of muscular tension.
So it actually is a strategic advantage.
Yes. So when Azzi Fudd takes that shot, she isn't fighting her own central nervous system. This is a major cultural moment for women's basketball, signaling a much healthier, more sustainable model for long-term athletic success.
That completely changes how I look at it. It's not just a PR soundbite, it's a cognitive weapon.
Exactly.
And this actually ties perfectly into the next huge trend from the source material, because this joy and passion we see at the top of the NCAA bracket, it's actually fueling a massive expansion of the middle class in women's sports.
A depth is exploding everywhere.
It really is.
Yeah.
It's no longer just a few elite schools dominating every conversation. Let's go back to Columbia University's breakout moment in the Women's Basketball Invitation Tournament.
The WBIT.
Right. They dominated BYU 81-64. Riley Weiss was named Most Outstanding Player. But we have to go back to that mind-blowing statistic. Columbia led for 96% of their total tournament time.
It's almost hard to comprehend.
Like, how do you mathematically sustain that?
Yeah.
They never let go of the rope.
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, it proves that depth in women's college basketball is expanding far beyond the traditional powerhouses.
But how do they execute that on the floor?
To lead for 96% of a tournament, you have to entirely eliminate the empty possession phases that usually plague college basketball.
Like bad turnovers, forced shots.
Exactly. Tactically, it requires a deeply synchronized offensive system, relying on early clock reads and perfect spacing. You force defensive rotations before the defense is even set. And on defense, you need incredible switchability so the opponent can never string together 3 or 4 consecutive stops.
It's like systemic suffocation. They just choke out the math.
Exactly. The system itself is elite.
And the source material shows us this isn't isolated to basketball at all. We can pivot over to collegiate tennis to see the exact same thing happening with team depth.
The UMass tennis team.
Yes. The UMass women extended their winning streak to 7 straight matches with a flawless 7-seal sweep.
A complete shutout.
Right. And the report specifically highlights their strong doubles play seamlessly, combining with complete singles control. Now, here's where it gets really interesting.
Okay.
In team tennis, you usually see a heavy reliance on a star player at the #1 spot, right?
The one-woman team model. Yeah.
Exactly. But we're seeing complete team balance here rather than relying on one star. So are we witnessing the death of the one-woman team era?
Without a doubt, a 7-0 sweep is the mathematical death of that superstar-reliant model.
How so?
Well, structurally, collegiate tennis begins with the doubles point. It's a high-speed, high-variance battle. If a program like UMass secures that point, they immediately fracture the opponent's psychological baseline.
Oh, they put them on their heels before singles even starts.
Right. Then you move into the 6 singles matches. Even if the opposing team has a top-ranked superstar who grinds out a win at the #1 spot.
It's just 1 point.
Exactly. UMass is deploying players at the #4, 5, and 6 spots who possess the exact same tactical discipline and endurance as their top players.
So it's a war of attrition.
Yes. The lesser conditioned players on the opposing team start dropping their racket heads, their footwork gets lazy. UMass's depth means they ruthlessly exploit those micro breakdowns. They just refuse to degrade.
That is brutal. And we see further evidence of this exact same tactical depth in soccer. The report brings in the Edwardsville soccer season opener.
A very telling match.
Yeah, a 3-1 win.
Yeah.
Gabby Thompson gets the spotlight for her 2 goals, but the source focuses heavily on their strong midfield control and tactical discipline.
That's the real story there.
Right, because midfield control requires everyone reading the exact same geometry.
Yes, if we connect this to the bigger picture, synthesizing these 3 sports, Columbia basketball, UMass tennis, Edwardsville soccer, we're seeing the emergence of next-generation pipeline talent.
The middle class is rising up.
Exactly. Tactical discipline and team depth are developing much earlier in these athletes' careers. They aren't waiting until the pros to learn complex systems.
They're arriving at college already knowing how to run a double pivot or an inverted fullback system.
Exactly. And that is a critical indicator for the future health of national teams and professional leagues. The baseline IQ is just vastly higher now.
It's incredible. But, okay, let me play devil's advocate for a second.
Sure.
If there is all this rising depth and new programs are breaking out and joy is fueling all these upsets, then surely the days of the untouchable dynasty are over, right? Parity's won.
You think so?
Right. But not quite, because our source material takes us to the ice and we look at the women's hockey national title game.
The near miss.
Yeah. Ohio State reaches the final. They have the depth, they have the tactics, but ultimately they fall to Wisconsin. Wisconsin holds the line.
They usually do.
I mean, I look at this and I think, playing Wisconsin in hockey is like trying to beat the final boss in a video game that has somehow memorized all your moves. You can be perfect, but the boss still wins. Why is that?
It's a great analogy. It forces us to explore the upset angle and the concept of dominance cycles.
Right. Why do some programs resist this trend of parity?
Because of the structural advantages of legacy programs. Ohio State might be executing brilliantly on the ice, but Wisconsin has incredible recruiting momentum, institutional knowledge, and psychological intimidation.
The ghosts of the program.
Yes. Think of Wisconsin as a massive data repository. They have a documented history of every conceivable high-pressure scenario.
So if they go down a goal, there's no panic.
None. There is no spike in cortisol in that locker room because their institutional algorithm has a direct countermeasure. Even with incredible consistency from top challengers like Ohio State, dethroning a dominant program like Wisconsin remains uniquely difficult.
Because if an Ohio State player has even a micro hesitation against the final boss, they miss the shot by a millimeter, and Wisconsin capitalizes.
Exactly. The psychological weight is still a massive factor.
Okay, so we've looked at the culmination of the winter and spring collegiate sports. Let's zoom out.
Time for the macro view.
Right. The sports ecosystem is this massive, globally connected calendar. How do all these individual achievements fit into the global timeline?
Well, Week 14 is fundamentally a transitional period.
Yeah, the report details the wrap-up of the Miami Open in tennis, which is a hard-court tournament.
Right. And this represents a major WTA momentum shift period.
Because they're leaving the hard courts.
Exactly. Players are transitioning toward the European clay season. This specific window is a critical insight period because it defines the rankings heading into the Roland Garros buildup.
And for the casual fan, it might just look like playing on red dirt instead of blue hard court. But the physics change completely, right?
Fundamentally. On a hard court, the ball skids low and fast, but on clay, the friction absorbs the pace. The ball kicks up high.
So a flat, powerful winner in Miami is suddenly sitting right in the strike zone in Europe.
Exactly. Players have to entirely reconstruct their swing mechanics to generate massive topspin. They have to slide into their shots instead of planting hard.
That's a huge biomechanical shift.
It is.
Yeah.
And if they fail to adapt during this exact Week 14 window, their ranking drops. And they could end up unseeded at the French Open.
Wow, so the stakes right now are massive for the summer.
Huge.
And we see an identical grueling shift happening in athletics. The source discusses the March cycle of indoor track and field competitions.
Yes, the transition to outdoor.
Right. Athletes are now moving from indoor championships to the outdoor season. Why does this specific transition matter to you, the listener?
Because this specific transitional phase is the foundation for Olympic cycle performance peaks.
Explain the periodization of that.
Well, an athlete can't peak year-round. The indoor season is a controlled environment. No wind, climate controlled. It's for building absolute explosive power.
Okay, the short sprints.
Right. But as we transition outdoors, they suddenly face wind resistance, temperature changes, and longer straights. Coaches use this period to shift from pure explosiveness to speed endurance.
Testing if the engine can hold up over a longer race.
Precisely. And the times and rankings established here dictate the lanes and heats for the global stage later on. If you want a good lane at the Olympics, you have to lay the groundwork right now.
It's incredible how everything is interconnected. And that actually brings up the final sort point, which ties everything together, the multi-sport expansion.
A very encouraging trend.
Yes. The report details the continued growth of women's participation across baseball, softball, and hybrid competitions.
Breaking down the silos.
Exactly. So what does this all mean for the future of sports categories as a whole?
It points to a trend of increased visibility across global competitions and development leagues. The ecosystem is expanding way beyond traditional categories.
No more being forced into just one or two acceptable sports.
Right. Women are no longer being funneled like that. There is a thriving multi-sport ecosystem allowing for incredible cross-pollination of athletic talent.
Meaning like a girl who plays baseball develops rotational torque that makes her a better tennis player later.
Exactly. Or a soccer player's spatial awareness, making her an elite basketball point guard. It destroys the old myth that you have to specialize at age 8 to be great.
Which also saves them from overuse injuries. It's a win-win.
It creates deeper, more resilient athletes.
Which brings us to the synthesis of this entire deep dive. We've been on quite a journey today.
We covered a lot of ground.
We did. We recapped the journey from the emotion and joy of UConn's undefeated basketball run, learning how dopamine beats cortisol, to the rising, suffocating depth of programs like Columbia and UMass.
And Edwardsville soccer.
Right. We looked at the stubborn, algorithmic dominance of Wisconsin hockey, and finally the grueling global preparations in tennis and track.
And this snapshot of Week 14 is just so vital for the listener to understand.
Why is that?
Because it documents the expanding visibility and cultural impact of female competitors on a global scale. It shows a living, breathing ecosystem that is getting deeper, it's getting more competitive, and most importantly, it's becoming more emotionally grounded.
It's a much healthier environment. Which leaves me with a final provocative thought for you to ponder.
Okay.
As this next generation pipeline matures within this awesome multi-sport ecosystem, and as joy and emotional fulfillment replace paralyzing pressure, will this entirely new psychological approach to sports eventually shatter the remaining unbeatable dynasties like Wisconsin hockey?
It's a fascinating question.
When athletes are playing for passion rather than fear, what new limits will they break? It's something to really chew on. Keep exploring, stay curious, and we'll catch you on the next deep dive.